Oakland A's UK. Oakland A's UK. The Oakland A's UK. The Oakland A's UK.
Okay, so on from there, we will talk to some MLB news. And of course, we always start, and unfortunately, would like to kind of escape it a bit with baseball, but we do need to talk about COVID-19. But in this case, the news is fairly good because Friday was the latest press release from Major League Baseball and the Players Union about the latest round of testing, and there were only 6 new positives out of 10,500 samples. So that means so far there were 21,701 tests with only 93 positives, 0.4%. So Jay, I think we can say it's probably gone about as well as it could have done so far. But the real test obviously is going to be when teams are coming together and flying to other venues.
I mean, yeah, for sure. That's and also just, you know, most of these players have only recently entered this kind of bubble or isolation or whatever you want to call it. And I imagine halfway through the season, that's when people might get a little bit lazier about, you know, not seeing other people, leaving, going, you know, like breaking some of the quarantine rules. I imagine that will happen a little bit deeper into the season. You know, you're not going to do it right away. Like as we saw, as I'm sure you saw in England, and as we saw in New York, like after a couple months, everyone on my block started getting a little bit lazier. They started going to, you know, having barbecues and having people over and just venturing a little bit further away from their houses. And I imagine, you know, baseball players are only human. Depending on how tightly they're actually going to be controlled, I imagine they'll do similar things in a situation that they're going to be in.
Yeah, I know Susan Slusser was saying after the exhibition game last night, so Monday night against the Giants, there were a few moments when players clearly just forgot themselves and were high-fiving each other. And that's so easy to do. We see it in soccer, the football too, where players, it's just so natural and ingrained to, you know, high-five or celebrate a goal or whatever. It's difficult to get out of that habit. But yeah, it definitely seems positive so far. Well, positive in a good way, not positive in a bad way. And the one big issue, I guess, Major League Baseball has got at the moment, and to be honest, it's not surprising because we always knew this was going to be an issue, but that comes in the form of the Toronto Blue Jays in terms of the fact that they, of course, are based in Canada, and Canada, for quite good reasons, you would say, is not overly keen at a bunch of MLB teams coming into their country. They did have an exemption to play their, or to do their summer camp, their pre-season training, at the Rogers Centre, but they have not agreed for the Blue Jays to play in Toronto as part of the regular season. So the Blue Jays are looking for a new home. Initially, they were looking at their minor league complexes, so their spring training camp in what is delightfully known as Dunedin. Sounds like somewhere in Australia to me. But
Dunedin.
Yeah, so that's in Florida. And obviously, it's a great complex, but you don't really want to be going to Florida right now, if you can help it. And the other team that was mentioned is their AAA team, Buffalo Bisons, which is in New York. I don't know if you're an expert on the Buffalo area of New York, Jay?
I mean, it's way upstate New York. In the winter, they get some of the highest snowfalls every year, but other than that, I can't, you know, it's a medium to small sized city. It's a typical AAA market.
Yeah. So I know it's one that they've looked at and would need a bit of work to sort out in terms of the lighting and space in the clubhouses and things like that. So the Blue Jays players have made their preference clear that they would prefer to be in a major league ballpark, wherever that may be. And at the moment, it's looking like PNC Park in Pittsburgh would be the choice that they are looking at most intently. Both of you guys went there as fans last year. Dom, I know you've talked about what a great ballpark it is. I've seen lots of pictures of it and it looks wonderful. Would be a bit strange, but I guess it's strange already. So another team playing there alongside the Pirates probably wouldn't make it any more strange, really.
Yeah, what's behind that choice? Is that to do with clashes, i.e. the least clashes, or?
It's a similar choice to kind of like when Rovers played Liverpool to warm up for the season. It's just kind of like people happen to know each other. Like the GM and other people in the front office have kind of worked for both organizations. So it really, at this point, it's about pulling favors and making things work. And I believe that I read yesterday that they have 30 home dates that they need to fill. 21 of them would be free if they were to use Pittsburgh. So they would still have to find an alternative venue for the other 9 games. Like, this isn't a 100% clean, easy.
They're gonna play in multiple Major League Baseball stadiums.
If they want to play in a Major League Baseball stadium, that's the only option. Originally, I kind of thought, maybe Texas's ballpark that they just vacated was still usable, but they actually went and moved the center field fence into 250 feet as part of a remodel for the XFL. So in hindsight, they would have gotten more money renting to the Blue Jays in 1 year than they would have, doing a half a year of XFL. But
oh well.
Yeah, it does seem interesting because I mean, we don't know what was talked about behind the scenes, but whether the Blue Jays perhaps had been given a certain amount of assurances that things would be fine, and then it changed fairly late on. But you would think from the outside that they would have had a decent backup plan ready to go, because this was always seemed like quite a big risk to me.
Absolutely. It seems astonishing that they're, 8 days away from their home opener on the 29th of July, and they don't know where the home opener is going to be. It's breathtaking. But if they do start in Pittsburgh, watch for the Blue Jays players to put on a bit of weight, given the proximity of Primanti's. For those who haven't listened to our podcast before, Primanti's is a famous sandwich shop in Pittsburgh that does sandwiches with like fries, coleslaw, and meat in the sandwich. It's incredible.
Do you think any of the Blue Jays players will go for the famous Primanti Brothers treble?
Jay is referring to my first day in Pittsburgh, where I had one for lunch, one for tea, and then went out celebrating Brett Anderson's win. His win where he hit two runs batted in and only gave up 1 run, and therefore won the game on his own. And bumped into him in Primanti's. I don't know if we're allowed to say that. He's a Brewers player now. It doesn't matter, does it? We can grass him up now.
As long as you don't reveal any confidential HIPAA-protected information that he may have told you in private.
Well, I won't tell you which of the Primanti sandwiches he had, but I had how do you pronounce it? The capicola ham?
Yeah.
The pastrami, and then I had a chicken one, which apparently is cheating for my third. So I looked at it as the perfect hat trick, but Jay reckons that the chicken one's cheating.
Yeah, probably the steak probably would have been a little bit better to go for the third one.
Yep.
The other two, though, are the only real options.
Well,
as always, I've took us way away from baseball.
So. That's all right. I was going to say Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a bit beefy, isn't he? So I could imagine him tucking into a big sandwich or two.
I'd also like to point out that any idea at all that this was going to be a home run, that they were just going to allow players from all the teams to come into Canada and play in Toronto in any sort of exemption, even under the best of circumstances, is a little bit ridiculous, because even for the preseason camp that they had at the Rogers Centre, the rules that the Canadian government put in place there. The players stayed in the hotel in center field in Rogers Centre. They were not allowed to leave the Rogers Centre complex. And if they were caught off of the Rogers Centre's complex, it was a $600,000 fine. That is the fine that these players would have been subjected to if they had broken their quarantine that the government. So the Canadian government was taking this very, very, very seriously from the get-go. Like, so the fact that we had a resurgence here in the United States, or, you know, that it spread to other parts of the country after New York got hit, this was always a realistic option that the Canadian government would have just said no.
And I don't know whether it was just Major League Baseball didn't want to be the ones to say to the Blue Jays, you have to go somewhere else. And they wanted the Canadian government to kind of force their hand almost, so that they couldn't be seen to be doing something unfair to the Blue Jays. I don't know. But it just seems, from the outside, without us knowing the ins and outs, it just seems crazy that they even have got to this point thinking that they would do it. And, you know, it's not just affecting the Blue Jays, of course, although it affects them more than anyone. Every team that's going, I think it's the Nationals who are due to play them in the first home series, wherever they will be. Well, they're now in limbo thinking, how are they going to plan their travel, where they're going to stay? You know, it's completely up in the air for everyone. That's a logistical nightmare that they've managed to set themselves up for, bearing in mind that it's already a logistical nightmare in getting all the protocols in place and following them. So, yeah, thankfully for us, with the A's being in the West and us being all West all the way this season, it's not our problem, is it? So unless we play in the playoffs, they did say, I think the Canadian government did say that if they get to the playoffs, which is probably unlikely, but you never know in a 60-game season for the Blue Jays, then depending on the situation, they may.
They won't get to the playoffs. Behave, Matt.
I commented on Twitter, because I used to live in Pittsburgh, so I have a lot of friends out there. I commented on Twitter that it wasn't bad enough that the city of Pittsburgh had to have a 92-loss baseball team. Now they've also given them a 95-loss baseball team.
Well, I guess that was the condition, that the Pirates didn't want Major League Baseball to put someone there who was better than them, maybe. Load them up, kind of thing. Anyway, I'm sure if the Blue Jays have to pay them rent, I'm sure the Pirates will use that money very wisely, and it will definitely go onto the player budget rather than into the owners' pockets, I am sure. Controversial, a little bit of controversy there to add to the podcast. We always like to stir things up here on the A's UK podcast.
Got the lawyers at the ready again.
Sorry?
Lawyers at the ready again.
Thankfully, the Jesus Luzardo's lawyer, it must have got lost in the post, thankfully. So no legal writs or serving of notices so far. So, yeah, we're going along okay to this point.
Takes at least a week, Matt, as we know from the banners.
That's true. Yeah, hopefully these ones get lost properly. I'll definitely be going back to them saying, what letter? We never got a letter. No letter. Never heard of a letter.